I used to think that the happiest place on earth was just marketing bullshit. Now I know better. It's not marketing. It's a warning. 3 months ago, I was just another broke college dropout with mounting debt and dwindling options. My roommate was threatening to kick me out, and my car payment was 2 months overdue. When I saw that Disneyland was hiring night shift janitors at nearly double the normal rate, it seemed like the universe was finally cutting me a break. The application process was surprisingly simple. One online form, a brief phone interview, and then an in-person meeting with a woman named Ms. Winters. She had this permanent smile that never quite reached her eyes. The whole time she interviewed me, she kept this little Mickey Mouse figurine on her desk, occasionally adjusting its position when she thought I wasn't looking. The night shift is special, she told me, tapping her long fingernails against a thick manila folder with my name on it. Not everyone is suited for it, but your background check shows promise. I hadn't done anything particularly promising in my life, but I nodded anyway. There are rules, she continued, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk. Very specific rules. Breaking them will result in immediate termination. The way she said termination made my skin crawl. You are not to open this envelope until your first shift. Is that clear? I nodded again, taking the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. One more thing, Ms. Winters said as I stood to leave. The daytime staff and the nighttime staff, we don't intermingle. Ever. There's a 30-minute buffer zone between shifts. You arrive at 11:30 p.m., not a minute earlier. You leave at 6:30 a.m., not a minute later. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, I said. Her smile widened just a fraction. Welcome to the Disney family, Jacob. I didn't remember telling her my name. That night, I stared at the sealed envelope for hours. My roommate, Tyler, kept asking what was inside, but I remembered Ms. Winters' words. Not until my first shift. Something told me she'd know if I broke that rule. The next day, I drove to Disneyland for orientation. It was held in a small building just outside the main park, unmarked except for a small plaque reading cast member services. Inside, there were about 15 other new hires, all looking as desperate as I felt. The orientation leader, a guy named Eric with a too bright smile and dead eyes, walked us through the standard Disney protocols: dress code, guest interactions, the Disney look. But he never once mentioned the sealed envelopes each of us clutched, or the night shift specifically. As we filed out, Eric pulled me aside. Jacob, he said quietly, night shift is different. Remember, the rules are there to protect you. He glanced around nervously. Don't ever take them lightly. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of departing new hires. That night I laid out my new uniform, a dark blue jumpsuit with a small Mickey Mouse patch over the heart, and set 3 alarms. Whatever waited for me at Disneyland, I wasn't going to be late. At 10:45 p.m., I pulled into the employee parking lot. Despite what Ms. Winters had said about arriving at exactly 11:30, I wanted to get my bearings first. The lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered here and there. I killed the engine and sat in silence, watching the minute hand on my watch tick closer to 11. At 11:15, I finally got out, clutching the sealed envelope in my sweaty palm. The night air was unusually cold for Southern California, carrying a strange metallic scent I couldn't place. As I approached the employee entrance, I noticed 2 security guards I hadn't seen during orientation. They wore the standard Disney security uniforms, but their badges were different. Black instead of the usual gold, with a small crescent moon where the Disney logo should have been. ID, one of them said flatly as I approached. I fumbled with my new employee badge, nearly dropping it. The guard examined it under a small UV light, then nodded. 15 minutes until shift change. Wait here. He pointed to a small bench just inside the gate. I sat, watching as a few other nervous-looking employees in the same dark blue jumpsuits arrived. None of us spoke. There was an unspoken tension in the air, like we were all waiting for something terrible to happen. At exactly 11:29, a soft chime sounded from somewhere inside the park. The guards straightened. "Night shift. Proceed to your designated areas," one announced. "Remember your rules." I followed the others through the employee tunnel that led into the park, the famous Disneyland that I knew. Bright, colorful, filled with laughter and music, was gone. In its place was a shadow realm of the same structures, eerily silent except for the occasional mechanical hum or distant echoing sound I couldn't identify. We emerged near Main Street, where a man in a black suit waited. Unlike Ms. Winters and Eric, he didn't bother with a fake smile. "New hires, open your envelopes," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Read your rules carefully, memorize them, then destroy the paper." With trembling fingers, I tore open my envelope. Inside was a single sheet of heavy parchment-like paper, covered in neat typewritten rules. At the top was my name and my assigned area, Fantasyland. I began to read, "Night shift rules for Jacob Mercer, Fantasyland section. 1. You will be assigned a cleaning cart. Do not leave it unattended for more than 3 minutes and 45 seconds. 2. If you hear your name called, do not respond unless you can visually confirm the source. 3. Stay on the designated pathways at all times. If you see a new path that wasn't there before, report it immediately using the radio code Pathway Anomaly. 4. Do not make eye contact with any mascot costumes, even if they appear to be occupied. They should all be stored away at night. 5. If the lights on Small World begin to flicker, leave the area immediately and do not return until 3:17 a.m. exactly. 6. Whistling is strictly prohibited between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. 7. If you encounter a child alone in the park, do not approach them. Radio for supervisor assistance using code Lost Balloon. 8. The carousel may activate on its own. This is normal. Do not board it under any circumstances. 9. If you see cast members in vintage, pre-1955 Disney costumes, do not interact with them. Maintain a distance of at least 20 feet. 10. Should you hear music from the 1930s playing anywhere in the park, retreat to the nearest staff area and wait exactly 30 minutes before resuming your duties. 11. Never enter the castle after 1 a.m., even if ordered to by a supervisor. 12. If you see a guest in the park during your shift, verify they cast a shadow before approaching. If they don't, use radio code Sunshine Request and evacuate the area. There were more rules, 30 in total, each more bizarre than the last. I read them 3 times, trying to commit them to memory. Around me, the other new hires were doing the same, their faces pale in the dim light. The man in the black suit waited patiently. When everyone finished reading, he produced a metal waste bin. "Tear up your rules and place them in here," he instructed. "From this point forward, they exist only in your memory." I hesitated, then tore the paper into tiny pieces, watching them flutter into the bin. The man added a liquid from a small bottle and dropped in a match. The papers burned with an unnatural blue flame. "One final note," he said as the fire died out. "You may see or hear things during your shift that you cannot explain. Do not attempt to rationalize them. Do not investigate them. Follow your rules, complete your tasks, and you will survive until morning. That is all." He turned and walked away, leaving us standing there in the eerie silence of an empty Disneyland. A supervisor appeared and began assigning us to our specific locations. "Jacob Mercer," she called. "Fantasyland, Zone 3. Report to the supply closet behind the teacups to receive your cart." As I walked toward Fantasyland, the weight of the rules pressed down on me like a physical thing. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. Less than 7 hours until morning. How hard could it be to follow a few strange rules? I was about to find out. The supply closet behind the teacups was larger than I expected, more of a maintenance room than a closet. Industrial shelving lined the walls, stocked with cleaning supplies labeled in a system I didn't recognize, color-coded bottles with symbols instead of words. In the center of the room stood my cleaning cart, a modified version of the ones I'd seen janitors use during the day, but with additional compartments and a small digital display. A woman was waiting for me, her back turned as she arranged something on a workbench. When she heard me enter, she turned slowly. "Jacob Mercer," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Diane. I'll be your supervisor for Fantasyland tonight." Diane looked to be in her 50s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and deep lines around her eyes. Unlike the others I'd met, there was something reassuringly normal about her. Tired, no fake smile, just the look of someone who'd been doing this job far too long. "First night's always the hardest," she said, handing me a small radio with a red button on the side. "Keep this on you at all times. The normal channel is for regular communication. The red button is for special circumstances. Use the codes you were given." I clipped the radio to my belt. "The rules," I started, not sure how to form my question. "Are there for a reason?" Diane finished firmly. "Every single one of them. The ones that seem silly will save your life just as surely as the ones that seem serious." She checked her watch. "It's nearly midnight. Let me show you your zone before I start my rounds." We left the supply room, me pushing my cart. The wheels made a soft, squeaking noise against the pavement that seemed unnaturally loud in the silent park. Fantasyland was different at night. The whimsical buildings that housed the rides looked almost threatening in the dim light, their colors muted to grays and deep blues. "Zone 3 is from the teacups to the border of Tomorrowland," Diane explained, pointing out the boundaries. "You're responsible for general cleaning, trash collection, and surface sanitation. The special tasks will come through on your cart's display." She tapped the small screen embedded in the handle of my cart. "Special tasks?" I asked. Diane's expression tightened. "Sometimes things need to be maintained beyond just cleanliness. The display will guide you through it." We stopped near King Arthur's carousel. Even powered down, there was something unsettling about the frozen horses with their wide, staring eyes. "Remember Rule 8, Diane said, nodding toward the carousel. "It will activate sometimes. When it does, just keep your distance. It'll stop on its own." "What happens if someone gets on it when it's active?" I couldn't help asking. Diane stared at me for a long moment. "We lost a night janitor in '93 that way, and another in 2017. We never found enough of them to bury." She said it so matter-of-factly that it took a moment for the horror to sink in. "You're joking," I said weakly. "I don't joke about the rules, Jacob. Not ever." She pointed to my cart's display, which had lit up with my first task. "Clean restrooms near Alice in Wonderland ride. Use only the green solution for mirrors." "Get to work," Diane said. "I'll check on you in an hour. Remember, stay on the paths, keep your cart close, and if anything seems off, use the radio." With that, she walked away, disappearing around a corner. I stood alone in the silent park, the weight of the rules heavy in my mind. The restrooms near the Alice ride were standard Disney facilities, impeccably designed to blend with the Wonderland theme. Inside, everything seemed normal, though the silence was unnerving. I'd never been in a Disney bathroom that wasn't filled with the sounds of running water, hand dryers, and chattering guests. I started with the basics, restocking paper towels, emptying trash bins, mopping the floors. Normal janitorial work. I was just beginning to relax when I heard it. My name, whispered softly from one of the stalls. Jacob. I froze, mop in hand. Rule number 2 flashed in my mind. If you hear your name called, do not respond unless you can visually confirm the source. Jacob. I need help. The voice was soft, almost childlike, coming from the last stall. The door was closed. My heart pounded as I remembered another rule. If you encounter a child alone in the park, do not approach them. Radio for supervisor assistance using code Lost Balloon. But I needed to visually confirm if it was actually a child. Moving as quietly as possible, I positioned myself to see under the stall door. There were no feet visible on the floor. Jacob, please. I'm stuck. The voice was directly behind me now, though I hadn't heard anyone move. I spun around. Nothing. The bathroom was empty except for me. With shaking hands, I grabbed my radio. Supervisor, this is Jacob in Zone 3. Lost balloon? In the Alice restrooms. Static crackled for a moment. Then Diane's voice came through, tense and professional. Confirmed, Jacob. Exit the facility immediately. Proceed to Castle Courtyard, and wait. Do not return to this location until given clearance. I didn't need to be told twice. Abandoning my cart, breaking Rule 1, I realized too late. I hurried out of the restroom. As the door swung shut behind me, I heard the voice one final time, no longer childlike, but deep and distorted. You left your cart, Jacob. Bad things happen when you leave your cart. I ran back in, grabbing the cart with trembling hands, and wheeled it out as quickly as I could. The display was flashing red now, with a countdown. 3:42, 3:41, 3:40. The 3 minutes and 45 seconds I could leave it unattended. I'd almost broken a rule on my first night. I pushed the cart toward the castle courtyard, trying to stay calm. The pathways seemed different somehow, either narrower or slightly altered from what I remembered seeing during the day. Above me, the castle loomed, its normally cheerful spires now ominous against the night sky. When I reached the courtyard, Diane was already there, speaking into her radio in a language I didn't recognize. She saw me and quickly finished her conversation. You heard your name, she said. Again, not a question. I nodded. In the bathroom, there was no one there. There's never anyone there, Diane said grimly. Not anyone living, anyway. She checked her watch. It's 12:43. The bathrooms near Alice are now off limits until 3:20 a.m. Continue your route, but stay in the open areas of Fantasyland. What was that? I asked. In the bathroom? Diane's face hardened. Rule number 1 of night shift that they don't write down. Don't ask questions about things you don't want answers to. She softened slightly at my expression. Look, just focus on following the written rules. They'll keep you safe. My cart's display changed, showing a new task. Polish brass fixtures on Snow White's Scary Adventures. Use only the blue cloth and silver solution. Get back to work, Diane said. And Jacob, don't leave your cart unattended again. Next time, the countdown might start at 0. As she walked away, I couldn't help but glance up at the castle. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure in one of the windows, a silhouette watching me. But when I blinked, it was gone. I checked my watch. Only 1:12 a.m. The night stretched endlessly ahead. Snow White's Scary Adventures looked even more ominous at night than it did during the day. The facade, designed to resemble the Evil Queen's castle, cast jagged shadows across the pavement. As I approached with my cart, I felt an inexplicable chill, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped several degrees. I parked my cart directly beside the entrance and gathered the supplies specified on the display: blue microfiber cloth and a bottle labeled only with a silver stripe. No words, just the stripe. I noticed that my hand was trembling slightly as I reached for the door. Inside, emergency lighting cast a dim blue glow over the queue area. The brass fixtures, handrails, decorative elements, door handles gleamed dully in the low light. I began polishing methodically, keeping an eye on my watch. The task felt strangely important, more than simple maintenance. As I worked my way deeper into the ride, the silence became oppressive. Most theme park rides make ambient noise even when powered down. The hum of electronics, the subtle creaking of mechanisms. But Snow White's Scary Adventures was utterly silent, as if holding its breath. I reached the loading area where guests would board the minecarts during operating hours. The vehicles sat motionless on their track, each one molded to resemble a wooden minecart from the film. I leaned over to polish a brass lantern fixture near the first cart. That's when I noticed it, a fine powder dusting the seat of the lead cart. I leaned closer. It appeared to be ash, gray and fine, with tiny fragments that caught the light. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Zone 3, status check," came Diane's voice. I fumbled with the radio. "This is Jacob in Zone 3. I'm at Snow White, polishing the brass fixtures." There was a pause. "Have you touched anything besides the fixtures?" "No," I said, then hesitated. "But there's some kind of ash in one of the ride vehicles." The silence that followed stretched for so long, I thought I'd lost the connection. Finally, Diane's voice returned, tense and controlled. "Complete your assigned task exactly as specified. Then exit the ride. Do not touch the ash. Do not disturb the ride vehicles. Acknowledge." "Acknowledged," I replied, a knot forming in my stomach. I finished polishing the brass as quickly as I could while still being thorough. The whole time, I felt as if I were being watched, though every time I turned around, there was nothing there. Just shadows and the frozen figures from the ride, the 7 dwarfs, forest animals, the evil queen. As I worked on the final fixture, an ornate brass apple on the exit gate, I heard a soft mechanical click from somewhere in the darkness of the ride track. I froze, cloth still pressed to the metal. Click, click, click. A slow, rhythmic sound, like a mechanical counter ticking down. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. My cart's display flashed urgently. Task complete. Exit ride immediately. I didn't need to be told twice. Gathering my supplies, I hurried back through the queue area toward the exit. The clicking followed me, growing faster with each step I took. As I reached for the door handle, it reached a frenzied pace, then stopped abruptly. I pushed through the door into the night air, relief washing over me. My cart was right where I'd left it, the display now showing a new message. Proceed to Dumbo the Flying Elephant. Inspect control panel in operator booth. I was about to wheel my cart in that direction when something made me look back at Snow White's Scary Adventures. Through the windows, I could see that the emergency lights had changed from blue to a deep, pulsing red, and silhouetted against that crimson glow was a figure, tall and angular, with what appeared to be a crown. I blinked, and it was gone. The lights were blue again. Shaken, I pushed my cart toward Dumbo, trying to convince myself it had been a trick of the light. The path took me past the teacups, which sat motionless on their circular platform. As I passed, I noticed one cup, painted a deep purple, was slightly off-center compared to the others. When I reached Dumbo, the operator booth was locked. My cart's display updated. Use key card from bottom left compartment. I found the card exactly where indicated and swiped it through the reader on the booth door. Inside was a cramped control center with various buttons, switches, and monitors. One screen was on, displaying a digital checklist labeled Night Protocol. Following my cart's instructions, I began inspecting each item on the checklist. Verify ride power is in standby mode. Green indicator. Confirm all elephant vehicles are in home position. Check that audio system is disconnected. Ensure movement sensors are active. Yellow indicator. Verify perimeter alarm is set. As I checked off the final item, I noticed something odd on one of the powered down monitors. Though the screen was dark, there was a faint reflection visible, like something moving behind me. I turned quickly, but the booth was empty. When I looked back at the screen, the reflection was gone. My cart's display updated again. Inspection complete. Lock booth. Proceed to Princess Fantasy Fair for scheduled maintenance. I locked the booth with shaking hands and returned to my cart. The park seemed different now. The pathways narrower, the shadows deeper. As I pushed my cart toward Princess Fantasy Fair, I checked my watch. 2:17 a.m. I was nearing the no whistling hours mentioned in the rules. The Fantasy Fair was a relatively new addition to Disneyland, a princess meet and greet area with a medieval village theme. During the day, it was filled with excited children waiting to meet their favorite Disney princesses. At night, with its shuttered windows and empty stage, it looked like an abandoned village from a horror movie. My cart's display provided new instructions. Check Royal Hall curtains for tears. Repair any damage with red kit only. I found the repair kit in my cart, a small red box containing thread, special adhesive, and what looked like gold dust in a vial. Inside the Royal Hall, the meet and greet area was set up with 3 separate stations, each with ornate backdrops and heavy velvet curtains for the princesses to make their entrances. I began methodically checking each curtain, running my fingers along the fabric to feel for tears. The first 2 stations were perfect, no damage at all. But at the 3rd station, Snow White's, according to the small apple motif embroidered on the curtain, I found a long, jagged tear near the bottom hem. It almost looked like claw marks. I knelt down with the repair kit and began to follow the instructions on my cart's display. Apply adhesive to both sides of the tear. Sprinkle with gold dust, then sew using the special thread. The process was oddly specific, almost ritual-like. As I worked, I became aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, charged with some kind of energy I couldn't explain. The silence deepened until I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, from somewhere behind the curtain I was repairing, came the softest sound. A gentle humming, a melody I recognized. Someday, my prince will come. I froze, needle poised over the tear. There should be no one behind that curtain. The humming continued, a woman's voice, sweet and pure. Then it stopped abruptly. "Is someone there?" a voice asked from behind the curtain. "I can sense you." I remained silent, remembering rule number 2. If you hear your name called, do not respond unless you can visually confirm the source. While the voice hadn't called my name specifically, the same principle seemed to apply. "I know you're there," the voice continued, now with an edge to its sweetness. "Won't you help me? I seem to be stuck." My hands trembled as I finished the last stitch. The repair was complete, but now I faced a dilemma. I needed to check all 3 curtains, which meant I'd have to pull this one aside. My cart's display flashed with a new message. "Do not open 3rd curtain. Exit immediately." Relief washed over me. I packed up the repair kit and stood, backing slowly toward the exit. "Leaving so soon?" the voice behind the curtain asked, dropping all pretense of sweetness. It was deeper now, distorted. "But we've only just met. Don't you want to see my new face?" The curtain bulged slightly, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. I turned and ran, shoving my cart ahead of me with enough force that it slammed into the exit doors, bursting through them into the night air. Behind me, I heard a sound like tearing fabric, followed by a high, unnatural laugh that faded into silence. Outside, I leaned against my cart, trying to catch my breath. The display had changed again. Proceed to Pinocchio's daring journey. Await further instructions. I pushed my cart toward Pinocchio's daring journey, constantly glancing over my shoulder. The feeling of being watched had intensified, and every shadow seemed to conceal movement just at the edge of my vision. As I passed by the castle, I noticed the time. 2:47 a.m. I was in the heart of the no-whistling hours now. Pinocchio's ride exterior featured colorful murals depicting scenes from the movie. In the dim night lighting, Pleasure Island looked genuinely sinister, and Monstro the whale's gaping jaws seemed ready to devour anyone who came too close. I parked my cart beside the entrance, waiting for instructions. The display remained blank for nearly a minute before new text finally appeared. Wait inside attraction queue. Supervisor en route. That was different. I hadn't expected to meet up with Diane again so soon. I entered the queue area, which zigzagged through scenes from the film. Even with the emergency lighting, it was difficult to see clearly. I made my way to the loading area and waited, listening to the oppressive silence. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No sign of Diane. I was about to radio her when I heard footsteps approaching from the ride track itself, where no one should be walking. The footsteps were strange, uneven, with an odd wooden clacking sound. "Hello?" I called out cautiously, immediately regretting breaking the silence. The footsteps stopped. Then, from the darkness of the ride track, "Hello. Is someone there?" The voice was stilted, each syllable pronounced separately, like someone learning to speak. It didn't sound like Diane. It didn't sound fully human. I backed up toward the queue, ready to leave, when my radio crackled. "Jacob, this is Diane. Where are you?" Her voice was tense, urgent. I pressed the talk button. "I'm at Pinocchio in the loading area. My cart sent me here to wait for you." "I didn't send any such instruction," Diane replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Get out of there. Now meet me at the carousel." As I turned to leave, the wooden footsteps resumed, faster now. "Don't go yet," the voice called, closer this time. "I want to be a real boy too." I ran through the queue, taking the emergency exit at the end. Outside, I grabbed my cart and pushed it as fast as I could toward the carousel, not daring to look back. King Arthur's carousel sat in the center of Fantasyland, its ornate canopy and dozens of hand-painted horses frozen in mid-gallop. Diane was already there, her expression grave as she watched me approach. "What happened?" she asked, taking a small silver device from her pocket and scanning my body with it from head to toe. "There was someone, or something, in the Pinocchio ride," I gasped. "It said it wanted to be a real boy, too." Diane's face paled. "Did it touch you? Did you feel any splinters?" "Splinters?" "No," I said, confused. "I got out before it got close." She seemed to relax slightly, putting the scanner away. "Good. There's been a containment breach. 3 attractions are now off-limits for the remainder of the night. Pinocchio, Snow White, and Princess Fantasy Fair." "What's going on?" I demanded. "What was that thing in Pinocchio?" Diane looked around cautiously before answering. "Let's just say some of the inspirations for Disney's characters were based on real entities. Not all of them are as friendly as their movie versions." She checked her watch. "It's 3:05 a.m. You're nearly halfway through your shift." My cart's display lit up with a new message. Clean water features in Fantasyland. Use only yellow solution for treatment. Back to work, Diane said. Stay in the open areas. If your cart instructs you to enter any of the off-limits attractions, radio me immediately. She paused. And Jacob? The rules about the carousel apply double tonight. It's getting restless. As if on cue, I heard a faint mechanical grinding from the carousel's base. The horses remained still, but there was a tension in the air, as if the entire structure was straining against its moorings. I'll be patrolling the perimeter, Diane said. The yellow solution is important. It's not just for cleaning. It's for protection. Make sure you treat every water feature thoroughly. She walked away, leaving me alone with my cart and a growing sense of dread. I found the yellow solution, a viscous liquid that smelled faintly of citrus and something metallic, and began my rounds of Fantasyland's water features. I started with the smaller fountains near the teacups, carefully applying the solution according to my cart's instructions. 3 clockwise circles around the rim, followed by a figure-8 pattern across the water's surface. The liquid dispersed with an unusual shimmering effect, and I could have sworn the water momentarily glowed before returning to normal. As I moved to each subsequent fountain, I began to notice something strange. Tiny ripples in the water when I approached, as if something was moving beneath the surface. In the largest fountain, near the entrance to the now off-limits Princess Fantasy Fair, I saw what looked like small handprints appearing on the water's surface before dissolving away. My radio crackled. Jacob, Diane's voice was hushed but urgent. Where are you? At the large fountain near Fantasy Fair, I replied. Have you treated it yet? I'm about to start. Good. Be thorough. That one's active tonight. As if to confirm her words, the water in the fountain suddenly surged upward in a column about a foot high before collapsing back. I jumped backward, nearly dropping the bottle of yellow solution. What the hell was that? I whispered into the radio. Just apply the treatment, Diane answered. Quickly. With shaking hands, I began the ritual. 3 clockwise circles, then the figure 8. As the yellow liquid touched the water, I heard a sound like a child's moan coming from within the fountain. The water bubbled and churned, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a face forming in the ripples, small, distorted, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. Then the yellow solution fully dispersed, and the water went completely still, unnaturally still, like glass. It's done, I reported, backing away from the fountain. Good, Diane replied. Proceed to your next task. My cart displayed new instructions. Inspect the Mad Tea Party ride controls. Check for anomalous settings. The teacups, officially named the Mad Tea Party, were just a short distance away. As I approached, I noticed one cup was still slightly out of alignment with the others, the same purple one I'd observed earlier. My cart's instructions directed me to the control booth, a small enclosed area where operators would normally stand during the day. Inside the booth, the control panel was surprisingly complex for what seemed like a simple ride. Buttons, switches, and dials were arranged in patterns that didn't make immediate sense. My cart's display guided me through a series of checks, having me verify positions and settings on each control. Everything matched the expected settings until I reached the rotation speed limiter, a dial that should have been set to 35%, but was somehow at 85%. According to my cart, this was definitely anomalous. Just as I was about to report this, the lights on the control panel flickered. The ride had no power. I'd verified that myself. But suddenly, the purple teacup began to rotate, slowly at first, then picking up speed. I watched in horror as it spun faster and faster, all on its own. The metal of the cup began to warp slightly from the centrifugal force, producing a high-pitched squealing sound. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. the cup now perfectly aligned with all the others. My radio crackled again. "Jacob, status report." It was Diane, sounding tense. "The purple teacup just moved on its own," I said, my voice shaking. It was spinning really fast. Then it just stopped. There was a long pause before Diane responded. "Reset the rotation speed limiter to 35%. Then get out of there. That ride is now off limits too." I quickly adjusted the dial and hurried out of the control booth. My cart's display had changed again. "Proceed to Castle Courtyard. Urgent maintenance required." I glanced at my watch. 3:46 a.m. According to Rule 11, I should never enter the castle after 1 a.m. But the courtyard should be safe, right? As I pushed my cart toward the castle, the entire atmosphere of Fantasyland seemed to shift. The air grew colder, and the emergency lights dimmed slightly, as if something was drawing power from them. In the distance, the carousel's mechanical grinding had grown louder, and I could now hear the faint tinkling of its music box, though the melody was distorted, playing at half speed. When I reached the castle courtyard, Diane was waiting, looking haggard and tense. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "Something's trying to break through tonight. Multiple containment breaches across several attractions." "Break through from where?" I asked. Diane's eyes met mine. "Did you ever wonder why Disney built this place? Why he was so obsessed with fairy tales? Some stories aren't just stories, Jacob. They're doors, and doors can be opened from both sides." Before I could process this, my cart's display flashed red. "Warning. It's a small world anomaly detected. All personnel evacuate Fantasyland immediately." Diane's radio squawked, and a panicked voice came through. "Multiple breaches at Small World. The dolls are—" The transmission cut off with a scream. "We need to go," Diane said, grabbing my arm. "Now." In the distance, I could hear it. The iconic "It's a Small World" melody beginning to play, slow and distorted. The cheerful tune transformed into something menacing and wrong. And beneath it, the sound of hundreds of small, mechanical footsteps, all moving in perfect unison. Diane pulled me toward Tomorrowland, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd fled this way before. Behind us, the Small World music grew louder, more distorted. The melody stretched and warped like it was being played on melting vinyl, the childish voices now guttural and wrong. "Don't look back," Diane ordered as we ran, my cart abandoned behind us. "Whatever you do, don't look back." Of course, part of me wanted to look, needed to see what was following us. But the raw fear in Diane's voice convinced me to keep my eyes forward. We reached the boundary between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland, a threshold marked by a subtle change in pavement texture and lighting style. As we crossed it, I felt a strange resistance, like pushing through an invisible membrane. Diane pulled a small device from her pocket, different from the scanner she'd used earlier, and pointed it at the boundary we'd just crossed. She pressed a button, and a high-pitched tone emitted from the device. Behind us, I heard what sounded like glass cracking, followed by angry, inhuman shrieks. "Temporary seal," Diane explained, pocketing the device. "It won't hold for long, but it gives us time." In Tomorrowland, the atmosphere was completely different. The retro-futuristic architecture, all smooth lines and gleaming surfaces, stood in stark contrast to the fanciful structures of Fantasyland. The emergency lighting here was blue-white rather than amber, casting everything in a cold, clinical glow. We stopped near Space Mountain, both of us breathing hard. I finally dared to ask, "What the hell is happening?" Diane wiped sweat from her brow, looking older and more tired than she had at the beginning of the shift. "Night shift isn't just about cleaning, Jacob. It's about maintenance. Of the park, yes, but more importantly, of the barriers." Barriers between what? Between this world and the others. She looked back toward Fantasyland, her expression grim. Disney knew. That's why he built this place, why he chose these specific stories. He thought he could contain them, use them, commercialize them. Use what? I pressed. The entities that inspired the stories in the first place. Diane's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing tomorrow's weather, rather than something out of a horror novel. Fairy tales weren't created to entertain children. They were warnings. My mind reeled, trying to process what she was saying. So all those rules, they keep the barriers intact, or they're supposed to. She checked her radio, which was emitting only static now. Something's different tonight, more aggressive. It's never broken through multiple barriers at once before. From where we stood, I could see clear across the central plaza to Fantasyland. The castle was illuminated by flashes of multicolored light from within, like some twisted rave. The small world music had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. What about the other night shift workers? I asked, suddenly remembering I wasn't the only new hire. If they followed their rules, they should be safe in their designated evacuation points. Diane sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Protocols are in place for breaches, but this is unprecedented. My watch showed 4:17 a.m., still over 2 hours until shift end. So what do we do now? I asked. Diane's radio crackled to life, emitting a series of beeps in a pattern I didn't recognize. Her face hardened as she listened. That's the emergency override, she said, clipping the radio back to her belt. We're being instructed to proceed to the primary containment facility. Where's that? Below Pirates of the Caribbean. We began moving again, skirting the central plaza to avoid being visible from Fantasyland. As we passed through Adventureland, I noticed that the usual jungle sounds, the recorded birds and insects that play even when the park is closed, were silent. The entire area felt unnaturally still, the tropical plants too rigid, as if frozen in time. The entrance to Pirates of the Caribbean loomed ahead, its Spanish-inspired facade darkened. No emergency lights illuminated this attraction, making it a black void against the surrounding architecture. Diane produced a key card and swiped it through a hidden reader beside the main entrance. The doors unlocked with a heavy thunk, and she pushed them open. Stay close, she instructed. The ride is powered down, but the water is still active. Inside, the familiar boat loading area was barely visible in the gloom. The artificial caverns that housed the ride stretched before us, an expanse of still black water leading into absolute darkness. The air smelled of damp stone and that distinct Pirates of the Caribbean water scent, part chlorine, part musty dampness. We need to get to the first scene, the skeleton at the helm, Diane explained, leading me along a narrow maintenance walkway that ran alongside the water channel. There's an access point there. We moved carefully, the walkway slick with condensation. The water beside us was unnaturally still, reflecting nothing despite the minimal light sources. Don't touch the water, Diane warned. Night water isn't the same as day water here. I was about to ask what she meant when something disturbed the surface. A ripple that moved against the direction of the channel flow, heading toward us rather than away. I froze, watching as the ripple grew larger, more deliberate in its movement. It knows we're here, Diane whispered, accelerating her pace. Hurry! We practically jogged the rest of the way, the ripple in the water keeping pace with us, occasionally breaking the surface enough to reveal what looked like the top of a pale, hairless head. Finally, we reached the iconic scene of the skeleton pirate at the ship's wheel. In the dark, with only my flashlight, The skeletal figure looked disturbingly authentic, its empty eye sockets seeming to follow our movement. Diane approached a section of rock wall that looked identical to all the rest, running her fingers along it until she found what she was looking for. She pressed in a sequence, and a hidden door swung inward, revealing a modern elevator that looked wildly out of place amid the pirate theming. "Get in," she urged. As I stepped into the elevator, I glanced back at the water. The ripple had stopped at the edge of the scene, and a pale hand was now gripping the walkway where we had just been standing, long-fingered, with too many joints, the skin gray and pruned like it had been underwater for years. Diane slammed the hidden door shut just as the hand began to pull something up from the water. The elevator started descending immediately. "What exactly are we dealing with?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's happening in the park tonight?" Diane leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly looking exhausted. Walt Disney wasn't just a visionary filmmaker and entrepreneur. He was also a collector of certain artifacts, items with connections to the original stories, the real entities behind the fairy tales. Like what? A mirror that once belonged to a German queen, obsessed with beauty. A marionette made from ancient wood that supposedly moved on its own. A spinning wheel that pricked the fingers of any young girl who touched it. She looked at me directly. These objects act as anchors, tethering the entities to our world. Disney thought he could control them by housing them in a place of imagination, using the power of belief and happiness to keep the darker aspects subdued. The elevator stopped, doors opening to reveal a stark contrast to the themed areas above. We stepped into what looked like a high-tech research facility. White walls, fluorescent lighting, and monitoring equipment lining the walls. Screens displayed various areas of the park, most of them showing static or distorted images. A few people in lab coats were huddled around a central console, arguing in hushed voices. They looked up as we entered, their expressions shifting from concern to relief when they saw Diane. "Supervisor 42, one of them said, a bald man with thick glasses. "We were beginning to think you didn't make it." "Had to evade a water entity and pirates," Diane replied. "Status report?" "Multiple containment failures," the man said, gesturing to the monitors. "It started in Small World at 3:12 a.m., a power surge that bypassed the audio suppression systems. Once the music began, it created a cascade effect through Fantasyland." "Casualties?" Diane asked grimly. 2 night shift workers unaccounted for. 3 security personnel in unknown condition." He glanced at me. "Who's this?" "New hire, Zone 3, Fantasyland." Diane put a hand on my shoulder. "He followed the rules, most of them anyway." The bald man looked me over critically. "He's been exposed to multiple active entities. He'll need to be processed." "Processed?" I echoed, not liking the sound of that. "Standard procedure," Diane assured me. "To make sure you didn't bring anything down with you." Before I could protest, 2 men in what looked like hazmat suits appeared, guiding me to a separate room. Inside was a cylindrical chamber that reminded me of an MRI machine. "Step inside," one of them instructed. "It's a scanning process, completely harmless." Given everything I'd witnessed in the past few hours, I was skeptical about harmless, but I had little choice. I entered the chamber, and a glass door sealed behind me. Soft blue light filled the space, washing over my body in waves. I felt a slight tingling sensation on my skin, followed by a momentary pressure in my ears, like descending in an airplane. "Clean," announced a computerized voice. "No attachments detected." The door slid open, and I was led back to the main room, where Diane was deep in conversation with the bald man and a new arrival. a woman in a business suit who looked severely out of place among the lab coats and maintenance uniforms. "Unprecedented breach," the woman was saying. "We may need to initiate blackout protocol." "That's never been tested outside simulations," Diane argued. "We don't know if the park could survive a full reset. If we don't contain this by dawn, the park won't survive anyway," the woman countered. She noticed me and fell silent. "Jacob," Diane said, waving me over. "This is Ms. Carson, Director of Night Operations." Ms. Carson studied me with cold efficiency. "You were in Fantasyland during the initial breach?" I nodded. "Tell me exactly what you saw, heard, and felt. Leave nothing out." For the next several minutes, I recounted everything. The voice in the bathroom, the Ash in Snow White's ride vehicle, the thing behind the curtain at Princess Fantasy Fair, the self-rotating teacup, and the sounds from It's a Small World. Ms. Carson and the bald man exchanged glances occasionally as I spoke. When I finished, Ms. Carson turned to the central console and pulled up what looked like a 3D map of Disneyland. Red dots pulsed at various points throughout Fantasyland, with a particularly large concentration at It's a Small World. "The containment failures are spreading," she observed. "The Mad Tea Party breach is concerning. That attraction's safeguards should have held. Unless something was deliberately tampering with them," Diane suggested. Ms. Carson's expression darkened. "You suspect internal sabotage." "The purple teacup was out of alignment hours before it activated," Diane said. "And Jacob found the speed limiter deliberately set to 85%. All eyes turned to me, and I nodded in confirmation. "The question is why?" Ms. Carson mused. "Why tonight? Why such a coordinated breach?" One of the lab technicians called out from a monitoring station. "Director, we're detecting movement in Main Street now. The entities are spreading beyond Fantasyland." The screens showed shadowy figures moving down Main Street, USA, figures that walked with jerky, unnatural movements. Some appeared to be wearing partial Disney character costumes, while others were more amorphous, their shapes constantly shifting and reforming. "They're heading for the gates," someone observed. "They're trying to leave the park." Ms. Carson's face went pale. "Initiate blackout protocol, now." Alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Red warning lights flashed and the technicians moved with sudden urgency, inputting commands at various stations. "What's blackout protocol?" I asked Diane. Her expression was grim. "A complete reset of the park's energy system, followed by a massive power surge. It disrupts the entity's forms and forces them back to their anchor points." She hesitated. "But it's dangerous, especially for anyone still in the park." "Our people know the evacuation procedures," Ms. Carson interjected. "This is the only option we have left." On the monitors, I watched as the emergency lighting throughout the park began to flicker. The shadowy figures on Main Street paused, seeming to sense the impending change. "Blackout in 3, 2, 1, called a technician. Every screen went dark at once. The park above us was plunged into complete darkness. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a single command was entered into the main console. "Surge initiated." The monitors flickered back to life, now showing the park illuminated by an unnatural blue light that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Every ride, every building, every pathway glowed with this ethereal illumination. On the screens, I watched as the shadowy figures on Main Street contorted in what appeared to be pain, their forms stretching and compressing as if caught in a powerful wind. One by one, they dissolved into mist that was pulled backward toward Fantasyland, streams of darkness flowing against the natural order. "It's working," someone muttered. The blue light intensified, becoming almost blinding on the monitors. Then, abruptly, it concentrated into a pillar that shot upward from the center of the castle, reaching into the night sky like a beacon. "Energy convergence successful," reported a technician. "Entities returning to anchor points." Ms. Carson's rigid posture relaxed slightly. "Damage assessment?" "Structural integrity at 89% throughout the park. Minimal physical damage detected." The technician paused. "However, we're reading high residual energy in all affected attractions. They'll need to be cleansed before regular operation can resume." "That's tomorrow night's problem," Ms. Carson said dismissively. She turned to Diane. "Get all remaining night shift personnel to safe zones. Once the surge dissipates, they can return to regular duties for the remainder of the shift." Diane nodded, but I could see concern lingering in her expression. "Director, the energy readings in Small World are still elevated. The surge didn't fully reset that attraction." Ms. Carson frowned, leaning over to examine the readings herself. "That's not possible. The surge should have forced all entities back to their anchors." "Unless," the bald man suggested, "the anchor itself has been compromised." A tense silence fell over the room. "We need to check the vault," Ms. Carson said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Now." She led the way to a heavy door at the rear of the facility, marked only with a stylized D insignia. A complex security system guarded the entrance: retinal scan, keycard, and a numeric code that Ms. Carson shielded from view as she entered it. The door slid open with a pressurized hiss, revealing a circular chamber beyond. Display cases lined the walls, each containing what appeared to be ordinary objects: a hand mirror, a wooden puppet, an antique spinning wheel, a small music box, and dozens of other items I didn't recognize. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, empty except for a circular indentation in its surface. "The Small World artifact is gone," Ms. Carson announced, her voice hollow. "What artifact?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity despite the tension. The bald man answered, "A music box created in 1889 by a Swiss craftsman who lost his children to a plague. It's said he carved the faces of children from around the world, hoping to trap their spirits and keep them forever young." He adjusted his glasses nervously. "It was the inspiration for the ride. Walt acquired it in the 1950s, Diane added. "It's one of the most powerful anchors in the collection. If someone's taken it..." "But who would..." I began, but was interrupted by alarms blaring once again. Red lights pulsed throughout the facility. "Security breach in Sector 7, announced an automated voice. "Unauthorized access detected." The technicians scrambled to their stations. One pulled up security footage that showed a maintenance corridor adjacent to their facility. A figure moved through the shadows, clutching something to its chest. "Freeze frame and enhance," Ms. Carson ordered. The image paused and sharpened, revealing a face I recognized. Eric, the orientation leader with the too bright smile. In his arms was a small, ornate box. "Son of a bitch," Diane breathed. It was Eric all along. "Who is he?" Ms. Carson demanded. "What's his clearance level?" A technician typed rapidly at a terminal. "Eric Morley, daytime operations. He shouldn't have night access at all." "Then how did he get down here?" Before anyone could answer, the lights throughout the facility flickered. The temperature plummeted so quickly that our breath became visible in clouds of vapor. From the speakers that had been announcing the security breach, a new sound emerged. The Small World theme, playing at quarter speed, the childish voices transformed into deep, guttural moans that seemed to vibrate the very walls around us. "He's activated the artifact," Ms. Carson said, her professional demeanor cracking. Real fear flashed across her face. if he removes it from park grounds. The containment field will collapse completely, Diane finished. Everything anchored here will be free to leave. The bald man turned to one of the monitors, typing rapidly. He's heading for the service tunnels beneath Tomorrowland. Those lead directly to the outside perimeter. Ms. Carson quickly issued orders. Security teams to all exit points. Full lockdown protocol. No one leaves the park. I don't care if they're staff, executives, or Walt Disney's ghost himself. She turned to Diane. Take 2 security personnel and intercept him. You know the tunnels better than anyone. Diane nodded grimly. She glanced at me, hesitation crossing her features, before she made a decision. I need him, she said, pointing in my direction. He's seen the artifact. He can sense it now. Ms. Carson looked like she wanted to argue, but instead gave a curt nod. Go. Now. Moments later, I was following Diane and 2 security guards, burly men with equipment I'd never seen before, something between riot gear and hazmat suits. We entered a service elevator hidden behind a panel in the monitoring room. Why me? I asked as the elevator ascended. What did you mean I can sense it? Exposure to anchored entities creates a connection, Diane explained quickly. You've been in proximity to multiple breaches tonight. Your sensitivity is heightened. She handed me what looked like a modified compass, its needle swinging erratically. This will help you focus that sensitivity. The elevator stopped, opening into a network of utilitarian tunnels, the famous underground system that allowed Disney employees to move throughout the park unseen by guests. Harsh fluorescent lighting illuminated concrete walls, marked with colored lines indicating different routes. Follow the blue line, Diane instructed the group. It leads to the Tomorrowland exit. We moved quickly through the tunnels, the only sounds our footsteps and the distant, distorted small world music that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The compass in my hand pulled strongly to the right at an intersection, the needle vibrating intensely. This way, I said, pointing down a narrower passageway that branched off from the main route. The security guards exchanged doubtful glances, but Diane nodded. Trust him. We followed the narrower tunnel, which sloped downward, the concrete walls giving way to exposed bedrock in places. The air grew colder, damper, with an odd metallic tang that reminded me of blood. The compass needle began spinning wildly as we approached a heavy metal door at the end of the passage. One of the security guards stepped forward with a device that bypassed the electronic lock, and the door swung open with a groan of disused hinges. Beyond was a space that didn't match the rest of the tunnels. Older, rougher, with stone walls that looked like they predated the park itself. Wooden support beams, darkened with age, held up a low ceiling. The only light came from a few bare bulbs strung along the passage. This isn't on any of the maps, one of the guards murmured. Because it wasn't built by Disney, Diane replied quietly. These tunnels were here before the park. Walt incorporated them into his design because, well, some places have power of their own. The distorted music grew louder as we advanced, now punctuated by what sounded like children's laughter. High-pitched, frantic, and completely joyless. The compass led us to a chamber, where the rough tunnel opened into a circular room with multiple exits. In the center stood Eric, his back to us, hunched over the ornate music box. He was turning a key on its side, winding it with precise, deliberate movements. Eric, Diane called out, her voice echoing in the chamber. Step away from the artifact. He turned slowly, and I had to stifle a gasp. Eric's too bright smile had stretched beyond the natural limits of his face, extending nearly to his ears. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the dim light like a nocturnal animal's. Diane, he replied, his voice layered with multiple tones. as if several people were speaking in imperfect unison. "You're just in time for the reunion." "What reunion?" she demanded, signaling the guards to spread out around the chamber. Eric's unnatural smile widened further. "The children want to come home, all of them, from every land, every time, every story." He stroked the music box lovingly. "They've been trapped for so long, in the ride, in the park, in the stories. Walt promised them freedom, but he lied. Walt contained them to protect people," Diane countered, inching closer. "You know what they are, what they do to children." Eric laughed, the sound bubbling up from his throat like thick liquid. "What they do? They play, they sing, they bring joy." His head tilted at an impossible angle. "Just like Disney is supposed to do." I noticed now that Eric's movements were strange, jerky and fluid at the same time, like a marionette controlled by an amateur puppeteer. His fingers moved independently of each other as they caressed the music box. "The night shift exists to maintain the barriers," Diane said, still moving slowly toward him. "You were daytime operations. How did you even learn about the artifacts?" "The children told me," Eric replied simply. "They whisper, if you know how to listen. They've been whispering for years, telling me how to set them free." His gaze shifted to me suddenly. "They're whispering to him now, too. Can you hear them, Jacob?" And the terrible thing was, I could. Beneath the distorted music, beneath the conversation, I could hear tiny voices calling my name, promising friendship, adventure, eternal youth. I shook my head violently, trying to clear it. The compass in my hand burned cold, the needle spinning so fast it was just a blur. "This ends now," Diane declared. She nodded to the guards, who raised strange devices that looked like modified flashlights. But before they could act, Eric twisted the key on the music box one final time. The melody changed, becoming faster, more frantic. The air in the chamber began to shimmer, and from each of the tunnel exits, a thick mist began pouring in, not white or gray but colorful, each fog bank a different hue. The mist swirled around Eric, lifting him several inches off the ground, his body contorted, bones cracking audibly as something inside him shifted and grew. "Take him down!" Diane shouted. The guards fired their devices, which emitted beams of the same blue light I'd seen during the park reset. The beams struck Eric, and he screamed, a sound no human throat should be able to produce. The music box fell from his hands, clattering to the stone floor. "Jacob! The box!" Diane yelled. I lunged for it, but the colorful mist formed tendrils that wrapped around my wrists, ice cold and surprisingly solid. They yanked me backward, away from the artifact. One of the guards managed to reach the box, but as his fingers touched it, the mist surrounding Eric coalesced into dozens of small, childlike forms, translucent bodies with two wide smiles and hollow eyes. They swarmed the guard, covering him completely. When they dispersed seconds later, he was gone. Not fallen, not injured, simply gone, as if he'd never existed. The remaining guard backed away in terror, still firing his device at the apparitions, but the beam passed harmlessly through them now. Diane had produced a vial of the yellow solution I'd used earlier on the fountains. She threw it at the music box, the glass shattering and liquid splashing across its ornate surface. The effect was immediate. The childlike figures shrieked in unison, their forms wavering. The mist began to dissipate, drawing back into the tunnels. Eric collapsed to the floor, his body returning to normal proportions, though his face still held that terrible stretched smile. "Get the box," Diane ordered the remaining guard, who cautiously approached, using a cloth to pick up the artifact without touching it directly. I was released from the mist's grip as it retreated, falling to my knees on the cold stone floor. My head pounded with the echoes of those childish voices, still calling, still promising. "It's not over," Eric said, his voice now hoarse but his own. He lay on his side, curled around himself like a wounded animal. "You can't keep them contained forever. The barriers are weakening. Tonight was just the beginning." Diane knelt beside him, genuine sadness in her eyes. "How long have they been influencing you, Eric?" He gave a broken laugh. "Since I was 7, my first visit to the park." His unnatural smile finally faded, replaced by a look of weary resignation. "They're not what you think, Diane. They're lonely. They just want friends to play with. They want vessels," Diane corrected grimly, "bodies to wear out and discard." She stood, turning to the guard. "Take the artifact back to the vault. I'll handle him." The guard nodded, carefully wrapping the music box in the cloth and retreating down the tunnel we'd entered through. I struggled to my feet, still dizzy from the encounter. "What happens to him?" I asked, nodding toward Eric. Diane's expression was unreadable. "Protocol for compromised employees is clear." Eric looked up at her, that terrible smile slowly spreading across his face once more. "It doesn't matter what you do to me. I'm just one of many. We're everywhere. Day shift, night shift, management. The children have been making friends for decades." A chill ran through me at his words. How many others like Eric were there in the park? How long had this infiltration been going on? Diane seemed to read my thoughts. "That's why the rules exist, Jacob. To identify those who've been compromised. The entities can't help but react to certain stimuli, certain actions." She pulled out her radio. "This is Supervisor 42. Artifact secured. 1 hostile contained, 1 casualty. Requesting Protocol Black for compromised employee." The radio crackled with Ms. Carson's voice. "Confirmed. Extraction team en route. Sunrise in 47 minutes. Get back to the facility." Diane pocketed her radio and turned to me. "We need to go." "What's Protocol Black?" I couldn't help asking. "You don't want to know," she replied, leading me back toward the tunnel. Behind us, Eric began to sing softly, the small world theme in a broken, childish voice. As we walked away, his singing gradually shifted, multiple voices joining in perfect harmony, though his lips were the only ones moving. I didn't look back again. By the time we returned to the underground facility, dawn was approaching. My watch showed 5:52 a.m., less than 40 minutes until the official end of night shift. The frantic energy of the crisis had subsided, replaced by the methodical efficiency of damage control. Ms. Carson and her team were gathered around the central console, reviewing footage from throughout the park. The security guard had returned the Small World music box to the vault, and technicians in special gear were performing what they called cleansing procedures on it behind the heavy vault door. "What's the status?" Diane asked, approaching the group. Ms. Carson looked up, relief visible on her face when she saw us. "Containment restored to 94% capacity. We've initiated localized memory protocols for the compromised areas." "Casualties?" Diane's voice was professional, but I caught the undertone of dread. 4 night shift personnel confirmed missing. 2 security officers in medical, condition unknown. Miss Carson glanced at me. Could have been much worse without the quick implementation of blackout protocol. The bald man, Dr. Winters, I'd learned, Ms. Winters' husband and head of artifact research, approached us with 2 steaming cups. He handed one to Diane and offered the other to me. "Drink this," he said. "It helps with the psychic residue." The liquid was bitter, herbal, with an aftertaste of something metallic. I drank it without question, too exhausted to be suspicious anymore. "What happens now?" I asked after a moment. Ms. Carson answered, "Now we repair, reset, and prepare for tomorrow night." She spoke matter-of-factly, as if we'd dealt with nothing more serious than a power outage. The day shift arrives in less than an hour. By the time the park opens at 8 a.m., there can be no sign of what happened here. "And Eric?" I pressed. A shadow passed over her face. "Protocol Black has been implemented. Eric Morley no longer exists." I wanted to ask what that meant, but something in her expression stopped me. "What about the other night shift workers?" I looked around the facility. "Do they all know about this?" I gestured vaguely at the monitors, the vault, the whole hidden operation. "On a need-to-know basis," Diane explained. "Most are like you were at the beginning of tonight, given rules without explanations. Only supervisors and special teams know the full scope." "And now me," I said quietly. Dr. Winters nodded. "Which presents us with a decision." He looked to Ms. Carson, who frowned thoughtfully. "You've seen too much for standard protocol," she admitted. "Normally, first-night exposure is limited and can be handled with minor memory adjustment during orientation follow-up. But your level of involvement tonight..." She trailed off. My stomach tightened. "Are you going to make me no longer exist, too?" "Don't be dramatic," she replied sharply. "We're not monsters, but we do have protocols." She turned to Diane. "Your assessment?" Diane studied me for a long moment. "He followed the rules mostly, showed good instincts, didn't panic." She shrugged. "I could use someone like that on my team." Ms. Carson raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting accelerated clearance?" "With monitoring," Diane added. "But yes." Dr. Winters didn't seem convinced. "After one night? There's no baseline for psychological resilience, no established loyalty." "He helped recover the small world artifact," Diane interrupted. "How much more loyal do you need?" They continued discussing me as if I wasn't standing right there, debating my fate in clinical terms. Finally, Ms. Carson raised a hand, silencing the discussion. "Jacob," she said, addressing me directly for the first time in a while, "you have two options. One, standard memory modification. You'll remember working your shift, some strange but explainable events, nothing about the entities or the facility. You'll be transferred to daytime custodial, normal hours, normal pay." "And option two?" I asked. "You join Diane's special maintenance team. Full clearance, proper training, higher pay grade. But you'll work nights exclusively, and you'll be subject to enhanced security protocols, including regular psychological evaluation." Her expression remained neutral. "It's not an easy life." I looked at Diane, who gave me the slightest of nods. Encouragement? Warning? I couldn't tell. "How long do I have to decide?" "Now," Ms. Carson replied simply, "before we initiate shift change protocols." I thought about everything I'd witnessed that night. The horrors, yes, but also the incredible reality behind the facade of the happiest place on Earth. A hidden world of ancient magic and modern containment technology, of entities from humanity's oldest stories kept in check by janitors with rule books. And I thought about my life before, aimless, broke, without purpose. "I want option two," I said finally. "I want to know more." Ms. Carson nodded, unsurprised. Most do, when given the choice. She turned to Dr. Winters. "Process him for level 3 clearance, full disclosure package, enhanced training schedule, residential relocation." "Residential relocation?" I echoed. "Night shift personnel live in company housing," Diane explained. "Specially protected. It's safer that way. For you and everyone else." Before I could ask more questions, alarms began to sound. Not the urgent klaxons of a security breach, but a softer, rhythmic tone. "Shift change warning," Ms. Carson announced. "T-minus 30 minutes today shift arrival. All night personnel report to exit points." The facility erupted into organized activity. Technicians securing equipment, guards changing positions, administrators filing final reports. "Come with me," Diane said, guiding me toward a different elevator than the one we'd used earlier. "I'll take you through shift change procedures." As we rode upward, I finally asked the question that had been nagging at me. "Is it always like this? Every night?" Diane laughed, a genuine sound that surprised me after the tension of the night. "God, no. Tonight was exceptional. Most nights are routine maintenance of the barriers. Following the rules keeps everything stable. But the entities are always trying to break through. Always," she confirmed as the elevator stopped. "Some nights more aggressively than others. Full moons, solstices, Halloween, those are always more active. But a breach like tonight, that's rare." We emerged in a locker room area I hadn't seen before, where night shift workers were arriving in groups, looking exhausted but largely unaware of the full crisis that had unfolded. They changed out of their uniforms, stored equipment, and moved toward a departure area. "Get changed," Diane instructed, pointing me toward an empty locker with my name already on it. "Regular clothes only for shift transition. No uniforms visible today's shift ever." I changed quickly, storing my janitor jumpsuit in the locker. Inside, I found a sealed envelope, thicker than the one Ms. Winters had given me initially, with Level 3 clearance initial briefing stamped across it in red. "Read that at home," Diane advised, noticing it in my hand. "Memorize it, then destroy it, just like your rules." "More rules?" I asked. "More explanations," she corrected. "But yes, more rules too. The entities evolve, so our protocols must evolve with them." She checked her watch. 20 minutes to transition. Follow me. She led me through a series of corridors that gradually transformed from utilitarian maintenance areas to more publicly presentable spaces. Finally, we emerged in what looked like a standard employee exit area, with time clocks and bulletin boards displaying typical workplace notices. Other night shift workers were already lining up, clocking out with practiced efficiency. No one spoke much. They looked drained but satisfied, like factory workers at the end of a productive shift. "Tomorrow night, you'll report to me directly at 11:15, Diane said as we joined the line. "I'll begin your enhanced training. Until then, get some sleep. The first week is always the hardest." When we reached the front of the line, I clocked out with my new employee badge. The time clock displayed 6:27 a.m., exactly on schedule. Beyond the exit doors, I could see the first hints of daylight brightening the sky. Day shift employees were visible in the distance, approaching from the parking areas, cheerful and energetic. "Remember," Diane said as I prepared to leave, "the day staff and night staff don't intermingle. Ever. They don't know what we do, what we protect them from. That's how it has to be." I nodded, thinking about the two separate worlds existing in the same physical space: the daytime fantasy of Disney, and the nighttime reality of ancient entities, and the rules that kept them contained. "One last thing," Diane added, her voice lowered. "What Eric said about others being compromised, it's not just paranoia. We've suspected infiltration for years, but it's difficult to identify them until they act." Her eyes met mine, deadly serious. "Trust the rules, Jacob. Always. They're the only things we know for certain will keep you safe." With that warning lingering in my mind, I stepped through the doors into the morning light. The air felt clean, normal. No metallic tang, no unnatural cold. Around me, day shift employees chatted happily, unaware of the night's events or the secret world existing alongside theirs. As I walked to my car, I passed a family already arriving for the day, parents and two excited children, eager to be first in line when the park opened. One of the children, a girl of about 7, stopped suddenly and turned to look directly at me. Her smile was wide, her eyes knowing in a way no child should be. "Did you have fun last night?" she asked in a sing-song voice. Before I could respond, her mother tugged her hand. "Come on, Emma. Don't talk to strangers." The girl allowed herself to be pulled away, but her eyes remained locked on mine for several seconds longer than comfortable. As they walked toward the entrance, I heard her begin to hum, softly at first, then louder. The Small World theme. I drove home with the sealed Level 3 clearance envelope on the passenger seat, my mind racing with everything I'd learned and everything I still didn't understand. One thing was certain. I would never see Disneyland or any fairy tale the same way again. The rules existed for a reason, and I intended to follow them to the letter. 3 months have passed since that first night at Disneyland. I've settled into a routine of sorts, if you can call what we do routine. I live in company housing now, an unmarked apartment complex near the park, surrounded by others who work the night shift. We recognize each other by small signs, a particular color of keychain, a certain way of nodding, the perpetual darkness around our eyes from living nocturnal lives. We don't socialize much. Some things are better not discussed, even among those who know. My training progressed quickly. Level 3 clearance gave me access to the true history of Disneyland, Walt's real reasons for building it, the network of containment technology disguised as whimsy, the ancient packs renewed with each fireworks display. By week 3, I was assigned to Special Maintenance Team 7, responsible for Fantasyland and parts of Adventureland. The rules change sometimes. Every night, we receive updated protocols based on moon phases, weather patterns, and something called threshold measurements that Dr. Winter's team calculates daily. Some nights we carry special equipment, the yellow solution, modified UV lights, or small silver charms that we place at specific locations throughout the park. I've learned to recognize the signs of an entity attempting to manifest. The sudden temperature drops, the way certain lights flicker in patterns of 3, the subtle shifting of pathways when you look away for too long. I've helped contain minor breaches, nothing like that first night, but unsettling nonetheless. A teacup that spun too fast, a talking animatronic that wouldn't stop even when powered down, a water feature that flowed upward against gravity. I've learned that the day shift has its own hidden protectors, people who don't know the full truth but follow their own set of rules to maintain the barriers during daylight hours. Character performers who never break role because the costumes themselves are part of the containment system. Ride operators who recite specific phrases when starting attractions, words that sound like friendly Disney patter, but are actually old binding incantations. Yesterday, I received notification of promotion to Level 4 clearance, which will allow me access to the deeper parts of the facility beneath Pirates of the Caribbean. Diane says I've shown exceptional aptitude for boundary maintenance, whatever that means. The higher clearance comes with better pay, but also more responsibility, and, reading between the lines of the paperwork, greater risk. I should be nervous, but I'm not. There's a strange comfort in knowing the truth, in being part of something so much bigger than myself, in protecting not just park guests, but the entire world from what waits behind the smiling facade of children's stories. Sometimes I see Eric in my dreams, his too wide smile stretched across a face that keeps changing, becoming other faces. Some I recognize from Disney movies, others older, grimmer, from stories that were never meant for children. He's always trying to tell me something about Walt's original vision being corrupted, about the entities not being what we think they are. I wake up before he can finish, the Small World theme echoing in my head. I've noticed things during my time here that I haven't reported. Small discrepancies in the protocols, moments when Diane or Dr. Winters exchange glances they think no one sees, doors in the underground facility that aren't on any map I've been shown. I'm keeping my own set of notes, hidden in my apartment, just in case. The little girl I saw that first morning, Emma, has appeared twice more. Once in the employee parking lot as I was arriving for my shift, another time watching me from a Tomorrowland walkway as I was doing my rounds. She's never with the same adults, but she always smiles that same knowing smile. She always hums that same tune. Last week, I found a small, crudely made doll in my locker. It was constructed of park maps, folded into origami-like shapes, with black thread for hair and button eyes. Pinned to it was a note in childish handwriting. "We miss you. Come play with us." I burned it according to protocol and reported the incident. The security team swept my locker and installed additional wards, but found nothing else. Tonight is the summer solstice, one of the most active nights of the year, according to Diane. We've been preparing for weeks, reinforcing barriers, checking and double-checking all the anchors. The rules for tonight's shift filled 3 pages, some of them contradicting others in ways that will require split-second judgment calls. As I prepare for my shift, laying out my uniform and reviewing the night's protocol, I can't help but wonder about what Eric said, about the entities being misunderstood, about them just wanting to play. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the park at night, in those brief moments between the constant vigilance and rule following, I feel something not malevolent, but curious. Watching, waiting, like a child with its face pressed against a window, looking in at a party it can't attend. I know better than to listen to these thoughts. They're how it starts, Diane warned me. The slow erosion of certainty, the questioning of the rules. It's how they get to you. But still. My alarm beeps. 10:30 p.m. Time to head to work. I tuck my Level 3 ID badge into my pocket, alongside my new Level 4 clearance card. I check that my apartment's protective wards are active, the special locks engaged. As I reach for the door, my phone chimes with a text message from an unknown number. It's more fun on our side of the mirror. The carousel is waiting. I delete the message and block the number. I know the rules. For now,